Okay, put the pitchforks down. I know what I said. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is legendary. It's the game that introduced the puppet. It gave us the Toy Animatronics. It gave us the Save Them minigame. But narrative-wise, it was a mess of 8-bit sprites and vague phone calls. Hey guys, Horror Lorekeeper here. The FNAF 2 movie just did the impossible. It took the chaotic lore of 2014 and refined it into a masterpiece of horror storytelling. It didn't just adapt the game, it fixed it. Today, we are compiling our biggest findings to prove why the movie timeline has officially surpassed the game timeline. We are going to look at Henry Emily's tragic importance. We are going to revisit the heartbreaking truth about Mangle. We are going to explain why Charlotte works better on screen. And finally, we are going to look at the Afton family and why the movie version is the darkest tragedy in horror history. If you're a game purist, this video might hurt, but if you're a lore hunter, this is your Bible. Let's crack this open. Yes, the game Aftons are iconic. Yes, the games built the entire franchise. Yes, Purple Guy is basically horror history at this point, but we need to have a very uncomfortable conversation, because when you strip away nostalgia, the game, Aftons are not always characters. A lot of the time, they're explanations. They're the answer key to a puzzle box. And the movies? The movies take that same family and do something terrifying. They turn them into people, not remnant machines, not soul metal equations, not timeline science fair, a dysfunctional family first, supernatural horror second. So here's the cursed question this video is built on. What if the movies wrote the Aftons better because they stopped trying to make them make sense scientifically and started making them make sense psychologically? In other words, the games prioritize mystery, the movies prioritize relationships, and that's why the movie Aftons hit harder. Let's break this down. Lore versus story, what are we even comparing? Before anyone clips this and titles it Lorekeeper hates the games, relax. This isn't a games bad, movies good rant. This is about two different storytelling goals. The games are built like an ARG. They're designed to make you ask, what happened? In what order? Who possessed what? What does this minigame mean? Why are the robots moving? So the Aftons become tools for solving. They exist to make the mechanics feel haunted. The movies are built like horror dramas. They're designed to make you ask, why would someone do this? How do you survive living under that kind of parent? What does this family do to the people around them? Who breaks the cycle? And who becomes it? So the Aftons become the story. And when you make the Aftons the story, you get something the games rarely deliver cleanly. Coherent character horror. Now let's go family member by family member. William Afton. The man is scarier than the scientist. Let's start with the big one. William Afton, the game version. A mad scientist game, William isn't just a killer. He's a builder, an experimenter, a man with underground facilities and specialized machines and a research program with a body count. He kills, and the story eventually implies there's a reason. Immortality. Remnant, control over death. And here's the problem from a writing perspective. A logical motive is comforting, not morally comforting, narratively comforting. Because once you give a villain a system, the audience starts to process him like a fantasy antagonist. Oh, okay, he's collecting X to achieve Y. He becomes a boss fight, a supervillain, a comic book bad guy with a lab. Even if he's horrific, the logic creates a distance. It turns evil into a project. The movie version, a sadistic narcissist with a family. Movie William, at least in the way he's framed, is scarier because he's simpler, not dumber, simpler. He doesn't need a glowing substance to justify what he does. He doesn't need a science experiment to excuse his cruelty. He kills because he wants control over bodies, over rooms, over narratives, over his kids. And that is real-world horror, because mad scientist is uncommon. But the father who treats his children like extensions of himself, the parent who uses fear as parenting, the man who builds compliance through intimidation and reward, that's not fantasy. That's a headline. That's coercive control. That's grooming. That's the kind of evil that walks through a front door and calls itself family. The writing upgrade. The movie version of William works better as a character because the story focuses on what makes him terrifying, how he recruits people, how he manipulates, how he uses affection like a weapon, how he makes everyone around him feel small. He isn't scary because he can build a machine. He's scary because he can build a person who obeys him. And that's why movie William is better written. He's not a lore device. He's a predator with a personality. Vanessa, trauma beats viruses. Now let's talk about Vanessa Vanny. And yes, I know, different continuities, different roles, but we're talking about the writing function of the character. The game version, possessed by a virus. Game Vanny is framed through the lens of glitch trap, a digital infection, a hack, a supernatural malware possession. And what that does unintentionally is remove the most important ingredient for character writing, agency. Because if the explanation is a virus made her do it, then the drama becomes technical. How do we remove the virus? How do we break the spell? How do we stop the program? It turns a person into a delivery system for plot, which is fun for mystery, but weaker for tragedy, because mind control is the fastest way to skip character decisions. The movie version, conditioned, not hacked. Movie Vanessa is compelling because the movies lean into something uglier. She isn't infected. She's conditioned. Her loyalty isn't code. It's fear. It's a trauma bond. It's years of being taught directly or indirectly that resistance costs you something, and that makes every moment she hesitates matter, because she's not fighting a virus. She's fighting her father. She's fighting guilt, survival instincts, learned helplessness, the part of her that still wants his approval. That's not press the button to delete glitch trap. That's a lifetime of psychological warfare in one person's body. The writing upgrade, the movie version gives us conflict that isn't just spooky, it's personal. When Vanessa helps William, it's not just the plot needs her to she's afraid, she's trapped, she's been trained. She can see the exit, but her nervous system won't let her run. And when she finally stands up to him, it's not a software update. It's an emotional event, a character moment, a victory that costs something. That's better writing, because it's not about magic. It's about damage. Michael Afton, the villain, beats the zombie. Now Michael, this is where I know the comments will turn into a war zone, so let me say it clearly. Game Michael is iconic, but as a character, he's often more concept than person. The game version, a silent vessel. In the games, Michael is largely a blank. He's the player, he's the camera, he's the excuse for why you're in the building. Yes, he has a journey. Yes, he suffers. Yes, he gets scooped and rots and becomes this walking symbol of consequence. But a lot of that is implied rather than dramatized. We don't get many scenes of Michael choosing. We don't get him talking, reacting, spiraling, bargaining, breaking. We get outcomes. And outcomes are not the same thing as character writing. He feels like the franchise's delivery driver for lore. He carries the plot from place to place. The movie version, a dark mirror. In the movies, if we dismiss my previous theory that Michael is already a zombie with Ennard using him as a skin suit, especially if you read the Aftons as the movies want you to, Michael Afton becomes a horrifying idea with a face, generational trauma continuing. Not a zombie, a choice. Movie Michael works better as writing because he's framed as an active participant in the family legacy. He's not just a guy who got scooped. He's a continuation. A what if the kid doesn't escape? A dark mirror to the more heroic, more human side of the story. And that's a massive upgrade because it creates an antagonist with history, a family conflict that escalates. The theme of sins of the father made literal. Instead of a silent redemption arc, we infer we get the tragedy of watching someone become what hurt them. That's horror. Not because it's supernatural, because it's familiar. Why this makes the whole family better. So when you zoom out, the difference is simple. The games use the Aftons to explain the world. The movies use the world to break the Aftons. The games say, here's the mystery, here's the machine, solve it. The movies say, here's the family, here's the wound, watch it spread. And that's why the movie Aftons feel more coherent. William has a motive that isn't a science project, it's power. Vanessa has conflict that isn't malware, it's fear and conditioning. Michael has a role that isn't passive, it's inheritance and escalation. The horror becomes human, not how does Remnant work, but how do you survive being raised by the kind of man who would do this? How do you stop becoming him? How do you live when your family is the monster? That's stronger writing, because you can understand it without a flowchart, and it still hurts. The movies didn't make the animatronics scarier, they made the family scarier. So, final verdict, the games made us fear the animatronics. The movies made us fear the Aftons. And that's the difference between lore horror and story horror. Lore horror makes you curious. Story horror makes you uncomfortable. Because once you strip away the sci-fi explanations, you're left with a simple tragedy. A father who needs control. A daughter who's been trained to obey. A son who either breaks the cycle or becomes the next link. That's not Remnant. That's a horror movie. But that's my read, looking at the Aftons as writing, not as a wiki page. Now I want to hear from you. Do you prefer the game Aftons as a mystery you solve, or the movie Aftons as a family you watch fall apart? And if the movies keep going down this more psychological route, which Afton do you think is going to snap first? Why does Henry feel scarier in the movies than he ever did in the games? Because you're right, he's not missing. He's on screen, he's credited, he hands Mike a music box and directly affects the plot, which is exactly why movie Henry matters more. In the games, Henry is basically a late game lever. You pull it, fire happens. He delivers a speech so clean it sounds like it came pre-written on a plaque. In the movies, Henry is a living adult inside the mess, a man who knows what's happening, a man who touches the story, and a man who still can't stop the nightmare from spreading. That's the core premise I'm planting my flag on now. Game Henry is a conclusion. Movie Henry is a consequence. He's not the guy who shows up to fix the plot. He's the guy whose choices and delays shape why the plot is this ugly. And the movie proves it with one small object that looks harmless until you think about what it's actually doing. A music box, a lullaby, a tool meant to soothe a child, being used to manage a ghost that never should have existed. Let's crack this open. The music box isn't help, it's damage control. In movie 2, Henry gives Mike Charlotte's music box to help with Charlotte. Most people read that as, finally, the adult has arrived, but I read it and I get this cold feeling in my stomach, because a music box doesn't solve anything. A music box doesn't free a spirit. A music box doesn't undo a murder. A music box doesn't stop a monster. A music box does one thing. It keeps something asleep. So when Henry shows up in the film continuity and hands over a lullaby like it's a key, that tells me Henry isn't the man who ends the haunting. He's the man who's been trying to contain it, and containment is what you do when you already lost. Movie Henry isn't a deus ex machina. He's proof the adults failed. Here's the big shift. In the games, Henry feels like the story giving itself an exit. He arrives late, speaks calmly, burns the board, and you're left with closure. In the movies, Henry showing up early doesn't create closure. It creates a worse question. If Henry is alive, present, and aware, why is the world still like this? Why are people like Mike and Vanessa still improvising survival? Why are the restaurants still traps? Why is Charlotte still violent enough that you need a lullaby to manage her? When a competent adult exists in a horror story and the horror still wins, that adult stops being comfort. They become indictment. Movie Henry being active doesn't reduce the tragedy, it increases it. Because now we're not watching a world that simply didn't have Henry. We're watching a world where Henry is here, hands shaking, eyes tired, trying to plug holes in a dam that broke years ago. And the water is still rising. Connection terminated isn't heroic. It's an apology from a man who waited too long. Let's take the game speech everyone loves and tilt it under a harsher light. In FFPS, Henry says, "I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name." In-game, it plays like Mercy, a final adult voice. A man cleaning up William's mess with one match and one speech. But the words themselves are not clean. I'm sorry to interrupt you doing what? Suffering. Being trapped, becoming a weapon, losing your name. That line is basically Henry admitting this. I showed up late enough that a child might not even remember who she used to be. Now translate that into the movie continuity where Henry is already moving pieces. Music box, warnings, conversations, involvement. Now the vibe isn't hero arrives, it's father realizes the cost of delay. Movie Henry makes the game speech retroactively uglier, because in the movies we don't get the clean burn first explain later fantasy. We get the messy human version. A man trying to manage consequences while knowing he should have acted before consequences existed. Charlotte's death hits harder in the movies because it's not outside the warmth, it's inside the machine. You also called out something important. Charlotte's death in the film continuity isn't the classic outside ignored security puppet shape. In the film timeline, it's nastier in a different way. It's internal, back rooms, hidden spaces, a trapdoor, a body caught and carried by the marionette. That matters for Henry because it changes the nature of his failure. Game Henry can be read as too late to save her. Movie Henry feels like she died inside the place you built to be safe, not outside the party, under it, like the restaurant itself swallowed her. And the marionette catching the body isn't comfort, it's the moment the building becomes a coffin that keeps walking. So when Henry later hands over a music box, it doesn't feel like a hero giving you a tool. It feels like a man handing you the only thing he has left that still works, a way to keep the coffin quiet. The music box reframes Henry's role. He's not freeing Charlotte, he's sedating her. This is the part that makes movie Henry feel more important than game Henry, because the music box is a choice. If Henry's solution is put her to sleep, then Henry has been living in a world where the best he can do is delay the worst. That's not plot convenience, that's character. And it sets up a brutal emotional dynamic. Charlotte is not at peace. She's being managed, like a storm you shut the windows for, like a dog you keep behind a gate, and that has implications. If Charlotte only stops when the music plays, then what happens when the music stops? What happens when someone breaks it, loses it, forgets it, uses it wrong? Now the story has a pressure point, a human one. A father's tool becomes the thing everybody fights over, and the tragedy is baked in. The lullaby that once helped Charlotte sleep as a living child is now a leash on her as a dead one. That's sick, that's poetic, that's FNAF. Movie Henry isn't the guy who burns it down. He's the guy who knows the monster is awake and still can't fully contain it. Movie Henry also gets framed as someone with deep connections to Freddy's past, business partner history, knowledge, secrets. But the movie doesn't hand you a neat blueprint that says Henry designed every hallway and every suit, so we have to be careful. Here's what we can say without making things up. Rolla. The film continuity shows Henry tied directly to Charlotte and to the marionette situation. He's informed enough to give Mike a specific tool for Charlotte. He warns and acts, but the danger still escalates. That last piece is the key. If Henry can show up and still fail to prevent the spread, then Henry isn't a button labeled fix lore. He's a character stuck inside his own disaster, and that's way more important than a final speech, because it means the movie is asking a different question than the games. Not will the good adult show up, but what does a good adult look like when he's already broken? The Silver Eye shows the Henry who can't live with it. Now the books. This is where people get mad because they think book reference means book continuity equals movie continuity. No, I'm not saying the movie is literally copying the novel timeline beat for beat. I'm saying the books give us a lens. In The Silver Eyes, Henry is consumed by grief. Charlotte's loss destroys him. And that story shows a Henry who removes himself in the most horrific, mechanical way possible. That's not a fun trivia nugget. That's a character thesis. Henry is the kind of man who can't just move on. He either creates life or he collapses under death. So when movie Henry appears and he's not the clean hero type, when he's moving like a man who hasn't slept right in years, that book shadow matters. It colors his on-screen choices, because the music box doesn't feel like I have a plan. It feels like I have one fragile ritual that keeps me from drowning. And if Henry is the only adult on William's intellectual level, then his grief doesn't just hurt him, it leaves everyone else exposed. Mike and Vanessa aren't alone because nobody exists. They're alone because the one person who should have been able to match Afton is operating at half strength, held together by guilt and old habits. The restaurant's decay isn't just spooky scenery, it's what happens when the creator stops feeding the place with care. Let's talk environmental storytelling. The movies lean hard on decay, rotting dining rooms, shut doors, dust and neglect, and the easiest read is, abandoned building equals creepy. But with Henry present in the continuity, the decay reads like something else, a legacy left to rot, because places like Freddy's aren't just businesses, they're expressions of intent. When the intent is joy, the place feels bright, loud, safe, even if the food is trash. When the intent dies, the place becomes a shell, and shells in FNAF don't stay empty, they get filled by whoever is willing to use them, which is why Henry matters. If Henry helped create the life side of Freddy's performance, characters, childhood magic, then Henry withdrawing emotionally creates a vacuum. And William doesn't just fill vacuums, he turns them into hunting grounds. So no, I'm not claiming the films confirmed Henry designed every spring lock, every hallway, every bolt. I'm saying the emotional architecture is clear. Henry's presence is tied to life, Afton's presence is tied to death, and the building shifts depending on whose influence is winning. The restaurant becomes a mood ring for adult failure. Henry's help with Charlotte doubles the tragedy from the last video. Let's connect this directly to the Charlotte thread. Last video, we talked about Charlotte as a volatile poltergeist, protective energy pushed into something harsher. In movie 2, Henry's tool is a music box meant to calm her. That implies something brutal. Charlotte's rage is known. It's not a mystery. It's not an accident. It's not, wow, who could have predicted the ghost child would be angry? Henry knows, and his response isn't free her, it's keep her asleep, which makes his failure feel like it happens twice. Charlotte dies in the first place. After death, she becomes something that needs sedation instead of salvation. That doesn't make Henry evil, it makes him tragic, because you can feel the shape of a man who's trying to do good with tools that are too small for the problem. A lullaby against a hurricane. Movie Henry is more important because he is forced to live in the middle chapter, not the ending. Here's the turning point. Game Henry gets to exist at the end of a timeline. He's a voiceover conclusion. He has the power of hindsight. He can sound calm because he's already decided to burn everything. Movie Henry doesn't get that privilege. Movie Henry has to exist while the nightmare is still mobile. He has to watch Charlotte's spirit get used, manipulated, escalated. He has to watch Mike and Vanessa carry weight that should never have been theirs. He has to face the fact that William isn't just a monster. William is a monster who grew in the gap between Henry's grief and Henry's action. And the movie gives Henry a role that's emotionally uglier than FFPS. He's not the one who ends it. He's the one who warns you it's not over. That voicemail-style warning energy, Henry admitting he knows what he and William created, and trying to arm Mike with scraps and warnings turns him into something the games never really let him be. A man trying to atone before the fire. Not clean, not confident, not certain it'll work, just trying. And that's why he's more important, because the movies are about living inside the tragedy, not skipping to the reset button. Henry's importance in the movies is that he makes the horror personal and human. So here's the corrected movie-consistent thesis. Movie Henry is more important than Game Henry because he isn't a last-minute solution. He's an active piece of the tragedy. He appears, he acts, he hands over a music box that proves he's been managing Charlotte's haunting like a wound that won't close. The connection terminated speech stops being a heroic mic drop and starts sounding like the kind of apology you only make after you failed a child for too long. The Silver Eyes version of Henry gives us a grim emotional template. Grief doesn't make Henry a superhero. Grief makes Henry fragile. And the decay of Freddys doesn't just read as spooky. It reads like what happens when the person who built life can't bear to look at what his life became. William weaponizes innocence. Henry tries to contain the fallout. And the kids, Charlotte, Abby, the others pay the bill. That's movie Henry. Not a clean ending. A living scar. Wrap up. So to pull it together, Green Henry shows up late and functions like a clean plot tool. Movie Henry shows up inside the conflict and proves the adults are still failing in real time. The music box isn't victory, it's containment. A lullaby used like a leash. Connection terminated reads differently once Henry is a living participant instead of a finale narrator. The Silver Eyes, Henry doesn't prove movie beats, but it shows how grief can remove Henry's ability to fight emotionally, mentally, morally. And that's why the movie version matters. He's not lighting the match at the end, he's standing in the smoke now. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the music box is Henry's attempt at mercy? Or is it Henry admitting he doesn't know how to actually free Charlotte, only quiet her? And if we get a third movie, what do you want Henry to be? A man who finally steps into the fight, or a man whose guilt makes him hesitate at the worst possible moment? Drop your theories in the comments. Okay, everybody loves the puppet. Everybody loves Charlotte. She's one of the most iconic good forces in the entire franchise. But I need you to do something painful with me for a second. Stop thinking about Charlotte like a lore answer, and start thinking about her like a character. Because here's the problem nobody likes to say out loud. In the games, is Charlotte actually a person, or is she a mechanic? A plot function, a supernatural respawn button that exists to explain why the animatronics are haunted. And if you look at her like a character, the movie version of Charlotte is honestly better. Not because she's cooler, not because she's stronger, but because she's worse off. Because the movies take Charlotte and do the one thing the games rarely let her be. A kid. A lost kid. A kid who doesn't know what she's doing. And that's what makes her terrifying. So here's the cursed question this video is built on. What if game Charlotte is a superhero who solves the plot, but movie Charlotte is a ghost who is the plot? In other words, the games made her a guardian angel. The movies let her be a poltergeist. And in horror, the poltergeist always wins. Let's break this down. The puppet problem. Mechanic versus character. Let's start with the most important difference. Game Charlotte is lucid. She's aware, she's competent. She dies and immediately starts operating like she read the instruction manual for the afterlife. She becomes the good spirit. She's the one who fixes what William broke. Movie Charlotte doesn't feel like that. Movie Charlotte feels like the building is haunted by a child who never got picked up, not a savior, a leftover. And that difference changes everything, because it changes what the puppet means. In the games, the puppet is basically a supernatural EMT. Okay, souls are loose, put souls in suits, contain the problem. In the movies, the puppet is a symptom. Something bad happened here, something stayed, and now it's leaking into everyone. One is a solution, the other is a wound that won't close, and a wound is always scarier than a solution. The give gifts problem. Competence kills tragedy. Alright, let's talk about the most sacred Charlotte moment in the games. Give gifts, give life. It's iconic. It's basically the moral backbone of FNAF. Charlotte dies and she becomes the force that gives the dead kids a way to move again. It's heroic, it's clean, it's almost too clean. Because here's the writing flaw, Game Charlotte is too competent. She dies and instantly turns into an organizer, a tactician, a fixer. And I know what you're thinking, but she's a spirit, she's special, sure, but from a story perspective, that competence creates a safety net. It tells the audience, don't worry, someone good is here, someone is trying to fix it. And that softens the hopelessness. It reduces the raw horror. Because if the puppet is there to solve the haunting, then the haunting isn't fully out of control. Now look at the movie's logic. The movie doesn't treat ghosts like chess masters. It treats them like what they are, dead kids, confused, stuck, emotional, reactive. So if movie Charlotte gives gifts, if she binds souls, if she creates a system, it shouldn't feel like a heroic plan. It should feel like a tragic mistake, like a child doing something nice that accidentally makes everything worse. Because think about what giving life really is. You're taking dead kids and putting them into metal prisons. If Charlotte is truly a kid, she might not understand the consequences. She might think she's helping, but what she's actually doing is creating eternal confinement, and that is a better horror story. Not because Charlotte is evil, because she's lonely, because she wants friends, because she wants company in the dark. So the movie version becomes more tragic and more terrifying at the same time. She doesn't save souls like a superhero. She traps them like a child building a fort and not realizing the fort is a cage. That's writing, that's character, that's pain. The name confirmation. Charlotte Emily changes the emotional weight. Here's where the movies do something the games take forever to let you feel. They anchor Charlotte to a family. If the movie timeline is openly calling her Charlotte Emily, not just the puppet, not just that kid from the minigame, then Henry stops being a late game lore reveal. He becomes a presence. Even if he isn't always on screen, because every time the puppet moves, the audience can feel the implication. A father failed, and that matters because the games don't really let Henry be felt until very late. For most of the franchise, Henry is a concept, a name in the background, a final speech, but the movies can make Henry's grief part of the atmosphere, so Charlotte's death stops being a lore event and becomes the thing that broke a man. The puppet becomes a physical reminder of loss, guilt, failure, and the fact that this didn't have to happen. And that is stronger storytelling than she's the good spirit who handles the possession logistics. Because grief is relatable. Remnant math isn't. The death scene change, heroism that creates the haunting. Now the games give Charlotte a very specific kind of tragedy. Locked out, crying, abandoned. It's awful, but it's also passive. It's a child being acted upon. In the movie framing you're working with, Charlotte's death has a different flavor. She dies trying to save someone. She isn't just a victim of opportunity. She's a kid who makes a choice, a good one, and gets punished for it. And that is a nastier kind of tragedy because it creates rage. Not I was unlucky, but I did the right thing and it didn't matter. That kind of death doesn't produce a clean guardian angel. That produces a haunting with teeth because it creates the perfect emotional engine for a poltergeist. Hero instincts, betrayal, abandonment, and unfinished responsibility. So movie Charlotte doesn't haunt because she's noble. She haunts because she's stuck between I tried to save someone and no one saved me. That's the kind of ghost that doesn't just float. That's the kind of ghost that lashes out. This is the biggest upgrade. In the games, we aren't really scared of the puppet in the same way we're scared of the others. Because we know she's good. We assign her morality. She's the guardian, the organizer, the one trying to set things right. So even when she's creepy, the audience relaxes a little. Because a protector spirit creates rules. If you're innocent, you're safe. But movie Charlotte is framed more like a vengeful spirit. And that's scarier because it makes her unpredictable. Not because she's evil, because she's emotional, because she's acting like a kid who died in terror, a kid who doesn't have language for grief, so she uses the only language ghosts have: manifestation, pressure, violence. She's aggressive toward adults because adults failed her. She's hostile because her life ended in betrayal, and that creates the best kind of horror. You can't negotiate with her, you can't reason with her, you can't explain the lore, you have to survive her mood, and moods are unstable. A benevolent ghost is comforting, a volatile ghost is terrifying. The Michael-Afton connection, weaponizing a child's anger. Now we bring in the most disgusting layer of the movie timeline, the adults, specifically the Aftons. Because if movie Michael is an active villain in the timeline, a continuation of William's influence, then you get a dynamic the games never fully dramatize. A corrupted legacy trying to use Charlotte's grief. Think about how evil that is. Charlotte isn't just the puppet. She's a child who died in pain. And movie Michael seeing that as an opportunity. That's not sci-fi. That's predatory. That's a villain recognizing a vulnerable force and going, can I aim that at my enemies? So instead of Charlotte being the one who fixes the story, she becomes the battleground. Her anger becomes a resource, a weapon, a living hazard. And that makes her feel more real and more tragic, because it's exactly what abusers do. They find pain, they shape it, they point it, and the movies can make that dynamic personal. Now you have 3 different relationships orbiting Charlotte: Horos, Henry as the grief source, Mike Schmidt as the one trying to calm the storm, Michael Afton is the one trying to harness the storm, which means Charlotte is no longer an answer. She's a conflict. The music box. Pacification, not mechanic. This is where the puppet becomes genius in the movie version. Because in the games, the music box is a mechanic. Wind it up or you die. It's gameplay. But in the movie timeline, the music box becomes emotional language. It becomes a lullaby. It becomes the closest thing Charlotte has to comfort. So when Mike Schmidt tries to pacify her with the music box, it isn't the player doing the correct input. It's a character trying to soothe a dead child, and that flips the entire vibe. The puppet isn't a boss you manage, she's a child you have to calm, which means when the music stops, it doesn't feel like game over. It feels like the moment a grieving child remembers she's alone again. And that is horror, not because it's loud, because it's sad, and sad horror lingers longer than jump scares. So here's the verdict. Game Charlotte is iconic lore, but from a writing standpoint, she's often a superhero. Lucid, competent, plot-solving, a supernatural safety net. She makes the universe feel fixable, and fixable is the enemy of hopeless horror. Movie Charlotte is story. She's a ghost, a kid, a poltergeist built out of abandonment, grief, and loneliness. She isn't here to save the world. She's here because she never got to go home, and that's why she's scarier. Not because she's stronger than the game version, but because she feels like what she actually is, a child-shaped tragedy that learned how to move the walls. The games made us fear the animatronics, the movies make us fear the emotional damage that creates the animatronics, and Charlotte sits right at the center of that. But that's my read, treating the puppet like a character, not a lore tool. Now I want to hear from you. Do you prefer Charlotte as the good spirit who fixes the hauntings, or as the volatile movie poltergeist who is the haunting? And if movie Michael really tries to weaponize her anger, do you think Charlotte ever becomes a protector again, or does she stay a storm that nobody can control? Why FNAF movie Mangle is more tragic than the game Mangle, okay? We need to rescue Mangle from the mean graveyard, because in the games, Mangle is treated like a joke you tolerate for 5 nights. A gender argument, a ceiling gremlin, a burst of radio static that makes you panic-click the flashlight like you're swatting a fly. And that's the problem. The game lets you laugh because the graphics are chunky and the pacing is mechanical, and the broken animatronic reads like a cool haunted prop. The movie doesn't let you do that. The movie makes you sit with what Mangle actually is. Not broken, not quirky, not lol the kids messed her up. Mangle is a kid-friendly performer designed to love children, and then forced to endure daily dismemberment as entertainment. A take apart and put back together attraction is a cute phrase until you picture it in real materials. Metal joints, cables, exposed endoskeleton, a face that keeps getting ripped off and shoved back on wrong. And the twist that makes it worse, that static noise everyone jokes about, it's not radio. It's a voice box that can't form words anymore. It's a constant distorted scream, not because she's evil, because she's confused, because she's hurting, because she keeps waking up in pieces. So yeah, today we're talking about why movie Mangle is more tragic than game Mangle. Because the movie turns a mechanic into body horror, and it turns a jump scare into a story about adults watching a sentient thing get tortured and deciding they can live with it. Mangle isn't scary at night. Mangle is scary at 2 p.m. Let me paint the version of Mangle the games don't have time to show you. It's daytime. Kids Cove is open. The lights are on. Parents are holding cheap pizza slices and not looking up from their phones. And in the corner is the Funtime Foxy attraction. Posters on the wall, bright colors, that happy mascot smile, and underneath those posters, a pile. Limbs in a heap like somebody dumped a costume shop into a garbage bin. A head turned sideways, wires dangling like veins, and the kids are proud because they think they're playing. They think this is what the attraction is. Take it apart and put it back together. That's the whole game. But if you're Mangle, if there's even a flicker of awareness in that thing, then the attraction is daily vivisection. In public, to applause. And the staff, they don't stop it. They schedule it. The horror isn't that Mangle attacks you. The horror is why she attacks you. Here's the line that matters more than any jump scare. From the FNAF 2 phone calls, Phone Guy gives us the most casual betrayal in the entire franchise. Eventually, they stopped trying and left him as some take apart and put back together attraction. Focus on the poison inside that sentence. Eventually, meaning this was happening for a while. They watched the damage accumulate. They watched the thing degrade day after day. And then the fatal part, stopped trying. They didn't fail. They quit. That's not we couldn't fix it, that's we got tired. It's the adult version of walking past something suffering and deciding that fixing it would be inconvenient. And then they left him like it's an old chair, like it's not a performer, not a character, not a body. They left it there, on purpose, as an attraction. Which means the cruelty isn't just the kids pulling it apart. The cruelty is the adults turning that destruction into policy. Now add the movie's realistic aesthetic and suddenly that line changes genre. In the game, take apart and put back together is cute corporate language. In the movie, it's a sentence that should get you arrested because it implies a routine. It implies staff reassembling a dismembered thing every day so it can be dismembered again tomorrow. That's not a malfunction, that's a loop, and loops create monsters. The kids did it is the clean lie. People defend the Kids Cove situation like this. It's not that deep. Kids are rough. They broke it. Stuff happens. No, that's the clean lie Fazbear Entertainment always hides behind. Because the kids didn't design the attraction. The kids didn't decide to keep it running after it became a hazard. The kids didn't stop trying. Adults did. Kids are chaos. Adults are choices. And what makes Mangle's story so nasty is that it's not even malicious kids. It's innocent cruelty. Kids do not understand what they're doing. If the trailer shots are showing toddlers tugging at wires, yanking pieces loose, dragging parts like toys, then that's the point. They're not evil, they're playing. Which means Mangle is trapped in the worst possible scenario. She is programmed to entertain the exact creatures that dismantle her. She can't defend herself. Not in the day. Her core purpose is be safe for children. So she endures, and endures, and endures, and endures. Until the lights go out, until the building empties, until the rules flip, and then at night she does the only thing she can do. She lashes out at the only target she's allowed to see as threats: staff, guards, adults, the people who could have stopped it, and didn't. That's villain motivation, not Haunted Fox Go Crazy. It's abandonment. Kids Cove is a crime scene decorated like a birthday party. Now let's talk about the Kids Cove visuals you mentioned, because that contrast is the movie screaming its theme. The poster says Fun Time Foxy, bright colors, smiling mascot, the promise of a show, and then the floor says something else, a pile of limbs, not a neat broken animatronic, a heap. That matters because it implies frequency. One accident doesn't create a pile. One rough kid doesn't create a boneyard. A pile means repetition. A pile means the staff didn't restore her properly. A pile means pieces were lost, replaced, swapped, jammed on wrong. And that's where the movie makes Mangle tragic in a way the game only hints at. Mangle isn't just damaged. Mangle is repaired wrong, over and over. Imagine being put back together by exhausted employees who hate their job and just want to clock out. Imagine your arm is missing so they bolt on a spare part from the back room. Imagine your head gets put on at an angle. Imagine your joints are tightened too far so every movement hurts. Imagine the kids come in the next day and rip you apart again anyway, so why even do it carefully? That's how you end up with Mangle's silhouette. That's how you end up with a character whose entire identity is wrong. Not born wrong, made wrong, by neglect. The static isn't a mechanic, it's a throat full of broken glass. Alright, audio time. In FNAF 2, Mangle has that garbled static noise. People have said it sounds like a police radio. People have argued it's a dispatch. People have treated it like flavor, like spooky ambience to make the cameras feel unstable. And as a game mechanic, sure, it's annoying. It spikes your stress, but in a story, that sound is devastating. Because what is static, really? It's signal that can't resolve. It's a message trying to form and failing. Now apply that to Mangle. A performer animatronic is built to do three things: move, pose, speak. The face is part of the act. The voice is the act. So what happens when you rip her apart every day? Wires get stretched, connections loosen, a voice box gets yanked out and shoved back in crooked, a speaker tears, a mic shorts, and the next time she tries to speak, the output isn't a line of dialogue, it's noise. That static becomes the sound of a character trying to do her job through damage she never consented to. It's like broken vocal cords. It's like someone screaming underwater. And here's the nastiest part. Static doesn't sound like laughter. Static doesn't sound like rage. Static sounds like panic that can't shape itself. Like confusion, like pain, like what is happening to me. So when you hear Mangle static in the game, you're hearing the end result of a long routine of take apart and put back together. Not haunted radio, a shredded voice. Stop trying explains why Mangle hates adults more than kids. This is where the phone call line becomes the key to her behavior. If Mangle was just broken, then her aggression is random, a generic haunted robot problem. But if Mangle was abandoned, if the adults saw the suffering and chose convenience, then her target selection makes sense. She doesn't go after the children, because she can't. Programming, mascot protocols, whatever safety systems still function, but she can go after the people who run the building, the people who decide what stays open, the people who decided a dismemberment attraction was fine. So Mangle becomes a perfect symbol of this franchise's real villainy, not just Afton, not just murder, corporate apathy, the kind of apathy that creates suffering and then calls it entertainment. Mangle's violence isn't evil, it's the first time anyone ever treats her like she's allowed to say no. Mangle as an agony engine. Now we pull in the books, because this is where the tragedy stops being emotional and starts being supernatural. Fazbear Frights gives us the concept of agony, that concentrated suffering that sticks to objects, infects places, warps machines. Agony isn't just a ghost lives here, it's pain soaked into matter, and Mangle might be the cleanest agony conductor in the whole toy lineup. Because think about the difference between other haunted characters and Mangle. A lot of animatronics are tied to a single catastrophic moment, a murder, a death, a spirit attaching to a suit. But Mangle is tied to repetition, continuous harm, not one trauma, a routine trauma that resets every morning. She doesn't just have pain, she produces it, daily. And agony loves repetition, it loves grooves worn into reality. If you want to create a haunted object, you don't just hurt it once, you hurt it again, and again, and again, until the pain becomes the object. That's Mangle, an animatronic built for joy, forced into a cycle where joy is the thing that destroys her. That's why she feels different from the Withereds. The Withereds feel like old wounds. Mangle feels like an ongoing wound that never scabs over. She's not an artifact of tragedy. She's a machine living inside tragedy as a schedule. Mangle is two stories welded together. Now we get to the detail that turns her from tragic into existentially wrong. Mangle has an extra endoskeleton head attached to her body. That second head is easy to treat as just design weirdness, spare parts, kids bolted something on, a messed up rebuild. But story-wise, that's horrifying, because a head is identity. A head is where the voice comes from, where the face lives. So if Mangle has two heads, the question isn't how did this happen? It's what does it feel like? Is it a spare part with no mind behind it? Or is it a second presence, a second victim, a second set of inputs and impulses jammed into one chassis? Even if you don't want to call it a literal spirit, narratively it functions like two minds, two signals, two intentions, one body that can't decide what it is, and that ties right back into the static. Static is what happens when two signals collide, when messages overlap, when a clean voice can't win against noise. So the second head becomes the visual version of the audio. Mangle is not just damaged, Mangle is overcrowded, and when the movie shows her in real lighting, real texture, real weight, two heads attached to a shredded body stops being cool monster. It becomes loss of autonomy. Someone took a character apart so many times that she stopped being a character at all. She became a pile that moves. The static is a duet, and neither voice knows where it ends. Here's the cursed read that makes me feel worse the longer I sit with it. What if Mangle's static isn't one broken voice? What if it's two? One voice is the intended performer voice, Funtime Foxy's stage persona trying to do its routine. The other is whatever got welded into her by constant rebuilds. The extra head, the extra endo, the leftover signal, the agony. Now imagine those two signals firing at the same time. One tries to speak, the other interrupts. The output becomes garble, not because she's glitchy, because her body is hosting conflicting attempts at expression. That turns Mangle from broken fox into something more tragic, a creature that can't communicate its own suffering cleanly. Even when she tries, it comes out as noise. So when you hear that static in the game, you've been trained to treat it as a warning sound, a mechanic. But if you translate it into story, it's the only thing she has left. Her scream is so mangled that you wrote it off as ambiance. That's the tragedy. Mangle is in pain so constant and so normalized that the world around her calls it atmosphere. And the adults, they heard it too, every shift, every day, and they still stop trying. Movie Mangle forces you to look at the cruelty the games let you skip. So here's the full picture. In the games, Mangle is a hazard with a funny reputation. In the movie timeline, with real materials and a grounded look, Mangle becomes a victim of systematic neglect. The phone call line, "Stop trying," is the confession. The staff didn't lose control, they surrendered responsibility. Kids Cove visuals turn a cheerful character poster into a sick joke hanging above a limb pile. The static transforms from radio interference into a broken voice box struggling to form words through damage. Agony turns Mangle into a walking battery of ongoing suffering, not a one-time haunting. And the second head makes her feel like two stories smashed into one body. Identity lost, autonomy gone, expression reduced to noise. Mangle doesn't attack because she's a monster. Mangle attacks because she's what happens when a place built for children treats a suffering thing as a prop. And if the movie commits to this angle, it rewrites her role. Not a meme, not a debate, not a jump scare. A tragedy wearing party colors wrap up. So to pull it together, stop trying is the real villain line. It reframes Mangle as abandoned, not merely broken. Kids Cove isn't cute chaos, it's daily dismemberment packaged as a game. The static isn't radio, it's a damaged voice trying to speak through constant trauma. Agony fits Mangle perfectly because her suffering is repeated, ongoing, and normalized. The second head implies identity fracture, 2 signals, 1 body, no clean voice left. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Mangle's static is meant to be police radio, or do you like the darker read that it's her voice box failing, a scream that never becomes words? And that second head, do you see it as just spare parts, or does it feel like 2 presences trapped in 1 body fighting for control? Drop your theories in the comments. I want the cursed reads, the sad reads, the ones that made you pause the trailer and go, oh no, that's not a joke anymore. But that's my read. I know the game purists are going to roast me in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me the 8-bit minigames have more soul than the movie. I want to hear your arguments. If you enjoyed this mega breakdown, hit like, subscribe to Horror Lorekeeper, and share this with a friend who still thinks the games did it better. Thanks for watching, and remember, the lore doesn't change, it just evolves.